Good day, viewers at home. Welcome to Home Learning. My name is Bongwe Cins. I'm not alone. I'm with Mbalis Melane and Tembuso Shiba. We're all from Woodlands High School. On Home Learning today, we are doing English language. Where we'll be looking at a descriptive composition. Let's welcome Mr. Lukhele as he take us through.
Thank you very much, Bongiwe. Let me take this opportunity and welcome our studio guests today as they are joining us for this lesson. And in today's lesson, as she has already said, we are looking at descriptive writing. So we are looking at a descriptive composition. As in the previous lessons, we've been looking at a narrative, and then we looked at it at how we should write a narrative composition and all the techniques and the mechanics that are involved there. And as promised, then in today's lesson, we are doing a descriptive composition. Maybe one may begin with telling the difference between a descriptive essay and a narrative one. With a narrative essay, as we have said in the previous lessons, we are all about answering the question, what happened? We are telling a story. But then when it comes to a descriptive essay, we want to paint a picture of whatever that happened to our readers. You want the reader to visualize whatever things or details that you include in your descriptive composition. So that's basically the main reason, or the main difference between the two. So today, let us look at the writing of a descriptive essay, and we'll be mainly focusing on the outline and on the structure of a descriptive essay, and then also your thinking process and your planning before you begin writing, because obviously planning is important to any, or rather before any form of writing is done. Okay, so writing an effective descriptive essay. The things that we need to do, or the steps that you need to undergo whenever you have to write a descriptive composition are, you need to first select a subject. And of course, the subject is going to be directed by whatever the prompt says in the question. So let's say you are given a topic where you are supposed to write a descriptive essay on an unforgettable event. You are supposed to write a descriptive essay on an unforgettable event. So when we say you need to select a subject, what we're basically saying is that an unforgettable event, it's the one that you're going to name it. You need to name the event that you're going to be describing. And then by that, you are selecting a subject. For example, when naming the event, it could be a wedding, maybe a soccer match, okay, that is a soccer match, or else it could be a perilous journey that you undertook. So basically, these are the subjects that is the subject of your description. It is going to be the subject of your description. It could be a wedding, it could be a soccer match, it could be maybe a dangerous journey that you undertook. So by doing that, under the broad topic that says unforgettable event, so you're describing an unforgettable event, the main thing is that you need to name the event. And a word of advice there would be, whenever you select the subject, or you select the specific event that you're going to describe, it should be one that you are familiar to, so that you are able to use the correct language, the specific vocabulary for that particular event. All right, so it is always advisable that make sure that you select a subject matter that you are familiar with, and you know the processes and the activities that go on there, because if you did that, it would be easy for you to paint that picture for whoever will be reading your essay. So selecting the subject is very, very important. And remember, the one thing about a descriptive essay that you want to achieve is that you want the viewer, or rather the reader, to be able to see the things that you saw, to be able to experience the feelings that you felt, and also to be able to hear and maybe smell everything that you smelled while you were there at that event that you are describing. So selection of a subject, like I've already stated, it is very, very important. Okay, here In the description, when you select the subject, let's say, because a descriptive composition could be you describing a place, it could be you describing an event, okay, as already alluded to. And again, we also describe what? A person. You can also describe a person or a thing, whatever thing that has been mentioned there. So these are the things that you can describe. And for each and every of these, make sure that you've got what? You've got sufficient vocabulary that you can use to describe these. You've got the enough adjectives, you've got sufficient adverbs that you can use there. So selection of the subject is the first step towards writing a descriptive composition, where you narrow it down to one specific event or subject that you'll be describing for your descriptive composition. Moving forward, the second step after you have chosen the subject is to select dominant details. All right, let's say you picked a wedding for your subject. So if it is a wedding, obviously you cannot tell us everything that happened about the wedding. So you need to pick the dominant details that make that particular event unforgettable, that make that particular wedding unforgettable. So the key word here is this one. It's unforgettable. So this is the key word there. So whatever details that you're going to include in your description should be the ones that make that event an unforgettable one. All right, so those are the dominant details that you're going to select, and then you will be giving us those details at length in terms of your description. So selection of the dominant details is very, very vital or important in that one. So when you select the dominant details there, you need to be careful and be sure that you are able to support whatever claim that you have. When you say this is an unforgettable wedding, make sure you are able to support that. And then your description echoes or reflects that wedding was really unforgettable for you. So basically, that impression that you had of that particular wedding, for you to think that it is unforgettable to you, those are the details that we want when you are describing, so that we are able to see that, okay, indeed, it is unforgettable for you. So this is very, very important. Maybe to make another example in illustration of that, let's say you are to write a composition, or rather you are to describe a bizarre incident. The dominant details that we will be looking for are those details that makes, or are the details that make that incident bizarre. All right. So when something is bizarre, obvious, okay, like it's something that is strange. So if something is bizarre, basically we're saying it is strange. What are the things that are out of the ordinary that happened in that particular incident? And then we say those are the dominant details that you need to focus on in your writing, because you cannot write about everything that happened there. All right. So basically, that is that. Before we get to the third point of our planning of a descriptive essay, it seems like Thembuso has a question. What is your question, Thembuso?
Thank you, sir. From the topic, how do you tell that you have to write it in a past tense or in a present tense? Because in some cases you find that you have to describe generally what happened, like Umhlanga in Swaziland. You have to describe it general. Or you are given a topic like a wedding, where you have to describe a wedding you attended in the past.
Thank you, Thembuso, for the question. It's a good one. Here is the point. The tense that you're going to use for a descriptive essay, and in fact for every other writing, it could be a narrative, it could be descriptive, it could be an expository and everything, is always determined in the question, because the question is going to have what? It's going to have a verb. So you assume, your writing is going to assume the verb that is contained in the question. So we'll make an example on that one. To answer your question, Thembuso, I'll use these two examples of questions. So the first one, It says, describe an annual event that takes place in your country. So here we said that it is important that we look at the tense that is assumed by the question. So in this question, this is the tense there of the verb takes. So it says takes there. So describe an annual event that takes place in your country. So this verb, which is in the progressive form, basically tells you that you're going to describe, your description should be in the progressive form. So you'll be describing things that happens, or rather the event, what happens in that event, which means that every year, not necessarily an event that you attended that is in the past. So an event that takes place in your country. It could be something like the Umhlanga ceremony. Then there you will mention what happens in that ceremony, which is Umhlanga in this case. But then when you go to question 2, it says describe an outstanding event that you attended. So again, the tense of the verb there is in the past. So if the tense of the verb is in the past, basically it says that you need to describe an event that happened, which means that the tense that you're going to use for your description is in the past, because it's an event that happened in the past. So I hope that answers your question. Moving right along, we now get to the third point, which is organizing your details. Organization is very key in whatever description that you need to give, because you want the person to see the picture, the way you are trying to portray it. So if you portray whatever picture that you are portraying, make sure that you organize the details very well. And then that part of the organization of details in a descriptive, we call it spatial organization. So spatial organization basically means that you need to organize your work in terms of space, in terms of time. Time, basically, it's the time order of the events that, the way that they happened there. So spatial organization is very key, because it makes it easy for the reader to follow your description and to see the image that you are trying to create in his or her mind. So organizing your work basically means that you have to decide when you want to describe whether you're going to begin from, for example, near to far, or you want to begin from the top to the bottom. So these are things that you need to consider, because basically they carry, or they'll portray however you want to present the picture to the readers. What are the things that are dominant that you want the reader to see? So your organization of your work needs to be like that. You don't necessarily have to do it haphazardly, meaning that, I'll make an example. Whenever you draw a picture, you want to draw a picture of a person, all right? Okay, you cannot begin by drawing the feet, all right? And then after that, maybe you say these are the legs, and then you decide to draw the arms. Somewhere there, you decide to draw, this is the head. And then you now complete your drawing with that. So basically, you can see that from this drawing, everything is disjointed, because you did not follow a particular order or any organization in your drawing. Rather than whenever you have to start with the head, there's the neck, these are the hands, and then you've got the body, legs, and the feet. At least this looks proportional, because there was a concise organization that you were following whenever you were drawing that particular drawing. So even when you describe someone, you cannot describe that person wherever you want. When you begin with the head or the facial appearance, then you're going to focus on the facial appearance, then move down the person until you get to the feet of the person, whatever that you describe about him or her. So even in your writing, it has to be the same thing, all right? Even in your writing, it has to be the same thing. Make sure that you follow a certain organization. So organizing in space, the things that you need to take care of when you are organizing your work, spatially, that is, will be divided into two. The first thing, for your description, you need to set the scene. when you set the scene, it's a general overview of whatever scene that you're going to describe or whatever event that you are going to describe. So setting the scene is basically creating the mood, all right, inviting the reader to get deep into your descriptions because you have set the scene correctly. Let's make an example of maybe you are to describe a prom night. So whenever you describe a prom night, the first thing that you'd want to do is to set the scene. And when setting the scene, basically, you'll be looking at the location. That is where the prom night was held. That is the location. Where did it take place? And the next one, it will be the appearance. How did it look like? What were people doing? What were they wearing and everything? So basically, by so doing, you are setting the scene. And you will begin again in the location, maybe in the venue. The location there being the venue. You want to describe the appearance of the venue. You want to describe striking features about that particular venue. And then by so doing, you are making sure that you are setting the scene and you are inviting the reader to read more and get deep into your descriptions. All right, so that is that part. And then again, from setting the scene, you know you will have people. There'll be characters there. Even in your description, you've got to have characters. There'll be people who are attending the prom night. So again, you will want to maybe let us in at some information in terms of arrivals, for example, who arrived in what and what not, and then who was saying what. And again, one other thing that is important whenever you write a descriptive is that some of the things you don't necessarily have to say them yourself. So you don't have to say it yourself, but you can use the characters that inhabit your description so that the reader can get to hear through what they say, which basically means that you need to create dialogue. And they should be the ones who are describing things there. They should be saying things so that you get the general atmosphere through the characters that you create, not necessarily that everything else should come from you. All right, so that's another strategy that you can use whenever you need to describe. And then again, the second part, it's important that you describe what happens. So it is important that you describe what happens in the order in which it happened. So basically you are saying that you should follow a certain chronology because it becomes easy again for the reader to follow the things or rather to follow whatever event or whatever thing you are describing. I'll make an example here. Again, I'll use the prom night. In the prom night, we know that there will be arrivals. So you want to give us details. The details will include the cars that they arrived in. They'll also include maybe the dress code. So those are the details, and it could also, again, the time in which they arrived. So those rather are the details that you want to include, and these are basically on the arrivals. And then again, moving forward, you would want to, the next one from the arrivals, it will be ushering in of guests. So the ushering in of guests would be maybe the second item of your description. Then maybe there'll be red carpet walk, the red carpet walk there if there's one. And even after that, maybe the activities themselves. So this is the chronology in which the events took place, or the activities they took place. So you want to follow that so that the reader is with you from throughout. I'll make another example. You go to a soccer match, wherever it is. you will begin with the atmosphere outside, with the appearance of the stadium, with the appearance or with whatever activities that was happening outside, and then you get inside the stadium, and then you make your description even there before the actual match begins. All right, so that is very, very important that we do it. So to maybe look at a brief summary of what I've just mentioned before we turn to our guests so now we are looking at focusing on the details while we elaborate more on your organization. All right, so let's just go together through this passage here. Whenever you are describing, descriptive writing often starts with a memory or an observation. So a memory, it could be something that you remember, or it's an observation, whatever that you see. And then something that catches one's attention. So here, one's attention, we are basically referring to you as the writer. What is it that caught your attention in that particular event? If it's an event, if it's a person that you met, what is it that you want to describe and caught your attention about that particular person or a place or a thing? So that is the one where everything else starts before you describe. And then let's say, so focus on the striking features that make that place, person, or thing stay in your mind. So what is key here is the striking features, all right? And then these are what we refer to as dominant details. What is it that is striking? What is it that is unusual about that particular thing you are describing? So in order to achieve that, you need to start with your first impressions of that particular thing. So that is the things, the features you first noticed about a thing, a person, or a place. What is it that is so striking about that particular thing that you are describing? And then after having done that, you need to gather the details by identifying the small things that help produce that impression. Those small things that help produce that impression. If you say something is beautiful, you then move from that general idea, saying that it is beautiful, and then tell us exactly what are the small things, what are the finer details that make that particular thing beautiful. All right, so that basically is what this point says, that gather the details by identifying the small things that help produce that impression. What senses you use to observe it. Keyword again there, senses. We are still coming to that part. And then the details that you have decided to include, those dominant details, the striking features, you then need to order them. We are still on organization, remember? So you need to order them spatially. So here, when you do that, when you order the descriptive details, it helps the reader to create a picture in their mind, the readers to create a picture in their minds if the details are presented in a sensible order. It is easy for the reader to follow whatever that you are describing. And again, to order your details, you might think of your eye as a camera lens. All right? There, you know how a camera lens works. You first choose a starting point, that this is my starting point, and then you decide on the best way to move your eye's camera across your subject. That is, you have to decide whether you start at the front and move towards the back. So you start here and you move towards the back, or vice versa. Or else again, you can decide to start from one side to the other. It could be you begin from the left and you move with your description, capturing everything across your path until you get to the other side. Or else again, you can decide whether to move from a far point to a near one. You get to the whole, you decide, okay, I'm going to begin my description. I'm going to set my eyes on the stage, and then from there, I will move towards where I'm standing. And along the way, I'm capturing everything that happens. I cannot go back and forth, because once you do that, the reader is going to be lost somewhere. It will be difficult for him or her to follow your description. All right, and again, what also helps is using transition words. And then you need to be careful again here, because it brings to mind the use of prepositions. you need to be very careful and be accurate with your use of prepositions, because here you are describing, and the main thing, the main objective is that you want the reader to see the things that you see. You want the reader to visualize whatever that you are describing. So make sure you use the correct words so that the reader does not get lost wherever. So here, using transition words or phrases helps you paint the picture clearly to the audience as you move from one detail to the next. So you don't mix up details, but you move from one detail to the next. And then they show how the details in a description are related. Transition words such as under, maybe to the left, behind, overhead, nearby, inside, and so on. They help link the details so that readers easily follow the path you have made. So without these transition words, you just have a list of details and not a description. So it is important that whatever in your description, you are able to direct the reader where this is located in relation to the other. So is it under that, or is it on top, or is it to the left? Maybe it's overhead, maybe it's nearby. So those transition words, they should form part of your description, which basically, they also give us what? Prepositions. So make sure that you try by all means possible to be accurate with your prepositions. Organization is very key. Whenever you write a descriptive composition, you need to organize your work clearly so that you help the reader follow and visualize whatever that you are describing. You want the reader to paint a picture of whatever you have described. All right, so make sure you organize your work so that your work is easily followed. Before we move on to the fourth point, I'll hand over to Bongiwe to take questions from our studio guests. See you after.
Before we take questions, let's take a short break and we'll continue after the break. Welcome back from the break. Let's take question. But have got a question.
Thank you, Bongiwe. In the interest of catching the reader's attention, we know that in some outstanding events, some things happen unexpectedly. So in the organization of the details, how can we include that? Because as Mr. Lukhele said, the thing has to be in chronological order. So how do we do that?
Thank you very much for the question, Bali. It is a good question. All right. I think one may begin by saying that those unexpected events that happens, they are the ones that you are looking for. All right. They are the ones that you need to describe because they add on that, on the dynamic part of the descriptive composition, or rather on the event. And then it is the dominant details that will steal the show. People are going to focus on that. All right. So those are the things that are going to make your description very capturing. I'll make an example here on how you can fit that one in your organization. You are describing maybe at a certain moment or point of a wedding, and then something unusual happens. You are going to fit that event that happened unexpectedly. You are going to fit that event that happens so unexpectedly at a particular moment of the procession there in the wedding, if it is a wedding. All right. So there'll be something that is ongoing at that particular time that you'll be describing, and then you are going to use that word that says unexpectedly, which is an adverb. Then something happened, and then you describe that from that moment. All right. And then again, from that, you'll be expected maybe to continue, because that thing that you decide to describe basically says that it is something that is dominant. It is something that you feel it's important. So there won't be a need for you to continue with the rest of the description, as you will assume we're going to continue, or rather we're going to describe it before that an unexpected event happened. So basically you can use that to shift your focus now on what happened. If in a wedding, or rather during the procession of the wedding, then something like the wedding cake slides and it falls off, then what happens thereafter? Those are the details that you're going to give to us. And then again, maybe you'll follow with the feelings of the people, the myths that will be surrounding that particular unfortunate moment. So until maybe the end of the description. Otherwise, there's no need for you to do that if there's nothing that is so special or so important about that particular unfortunate incident that happened. There's no need for you to include it if it's not going to be important, if it's not going to change the cause of your description. All right, so it is important again in your organization that you can use that event to redirect your description, because there'll be reactions. Maybe you want to tell us about the reactions and then what happened thereafter. It is also important that you take then the different route. You cannot just include it and then again move on with your description as you were doing before it happened, that particular event that happened unexpectedly.
Mbali, I hope you have been answered. Let's allow Mr. Lukhele to continue. Over to you, sir.
Thank you very much, Bongiwe. So now we move on to our fourth part, which is very, very critical. In fact, this, I can say, it's the heart of every description, the one that we're getting into. Point number 4 here says that use descriptive words. And what is important about your use of descriptive words is the fact that we know when we describe, we'll have to use verbs, we have to use adjectives, we have to use adverbs. All right. So while doing that, make sure that the verbs that you choose, the adjectives, and also the adverbs that you choose to use, you choose them carefully. All right? Because the one important thing, remember the art of narrating and the art, basically it's the art of writing. That one that says you need to show, so you need to show and not tell. So that art is very, very important even here. Show us instead of telling us. So you don't have to narrate the things. You don't have to say to us that my father or the man was said, but give us the verbs, or give us the descriptions rather, that says to us that this person was said. If you say someone was, he said whatever he said, frowning, with a frown in his face, then we know that, okay, fine, that person is maybe said. So that is important, the use of descriptive words. We are going to spend some time here with especially examples on what not to do, and instead, how can you improve that? It is, how is it better accepted or acceptable to the reader or to the audience, whatever that we'll be using as examples. All right, so here you need by all means to avoid the use of maybe vague adjectives. So we say, do not or rather avoid use of vague adjectives. What are vague adjectives? When you say vague adjectives, basically, what are we saying? So these include words like, when you say something is good, and you say something is nice, when you say something is beautiful. So these are so vague. When you mean nice, exactly what is nice? When you mean something, it is good. This is so abstract. So it is so vague, and it can be good in what sense? So we don't use these ones. When you say something is fine, what is fine? If it is fine, how is it fine? That is the thing. So that's the question rather. So how best can we improve these ones, these adjectives, so that they become more specific whenever you use them? They become more specific on basically in the range of good. Which good are you referring to? So let's take an example of this sentence. The bride arrived in a beautiful car. When you say the car was beautiful, you are being vague. In what sense? What are the features in the car that makes you say it was beautiful? So how do you quantify that, or rather, how do you qualify that the car is beautiful? What are the things, the features, the striking features that makes you to conclude that the car is, or rather was, beautiful? So an example of how you would be expected maybe to improve what you are saying so that you become more precise, you avoid being vague, they would be to write maybe a sentence like this one. So instead, we can improve this sentence by saying the bride arrived in a sleek red BMW convertible. By saying that, you have improved, you have given us more details, you have become more specific in your description that beautiful, what makes you say it is beautiful is because it was sleek, red in color, maybe red is your favorite color, it's a BMW, and again, it is a convertible. All right, so if you know about cars, you can then give maybe more details, such as maybe in chrome rims and everything. So this is the way in which you can improve your writing. You have become more specific when you say that the BMW, it's a BMW, the car, all right? And it was red, it is a convertible. That is what makes you say it is beautiful. So now it is better. Everyone can see that, okay, fine, that is why you say the car was beautiful. Let's maybe go to another example there. So in that one, before we get to the next example, we are basically saying that avoid the use of vague adjectives, such as good, such as nice, such as beautiful, such as fine, and there's many more that you don't have to use. But instead, what are the features? Rather focus on the features that makes you say that particular thing is nice or is beautiful, as we have made an example here. So we're going to continue with our example. And then in this case, now we're going to be looking at, again, another rule is that you need to also avoid the use of, so avoid using single nouns. All right, so there in the previous example, for example, when you say car, you need to be more specific. Which car are you talking about? And again, there'll be differences in the nouns, but what is it exactly that you are referring to? Let's take, maybe let's make an example of, you cannot just say a male appeared. You need to be more specific with that noun that you're going to use. That exactly when you talk about a male, are you referring to a boy? Are you referring to a young man? Or you are referring to maybe a matured man? So single nouns, make sure that you avoid using them. And again, just saying a man appeared, even that itself, it's not enough, all right? Because you have just used a single noun. But then instead, you can always use what? An adjective, because we know that adjectives are there to qualify a noun. All right, so that is really important that you do that. So avoid the using of single nouns. And then while still, again, when you want to be more specific, we'll take another example of a sentence that you can otherwise write, which you can improve. So now let's turn our focus on this example here. There's nothing wrong with it grammatically and everything. We ate a nice buffet supper. How was the food? It was nice. Exactly what makes you say it was nice? So again, this is another example that we can always improve our writing. All right, so we ate a nice buffet supper. How can we improve that one to be more specific and paint the picture rather to the viewer, to the reader in this case? All right, so this one can be best if we can maybe write it like this. So instead of writing we ate a nice buffet supper, questions are so many there. For example, what is supper? Exactly when you said you had supper, okay, you ate a nice buffet supper, what is supper? There's no specific details there. And then again, eating has got different forms of eating, so you need to be even more specific in describing that, the manner in which you ate. You don't necessarily have to tell us that you enjoyed it, all right? You enjoyed the food. you can use or substitute eating with another verb that means the same thing, but it becomes more specific. You don't have to tell us that it was nice, but then you can just use what? The correct verb or a specific verb to tell us that, okay, you really enjoyed the food. So here we can improve the sentence by saying we devoured on succulent, sticky spare ribs, dripping with a barbecue sauce. Rather, dripping in barbecue sauce. So here it becomes more specific. When you use this one, devoured, you are basically telling us that you enjoyed the food, because you cannot devour anything that you do not enjoy. All right? And then again, you give us the specific details of the supper you are talking about, if it was supper. So they were so succulent, not nice, all right? But then they were succulent and they were sticky. And then the reader, this permits the reader to imagine that. So this is the important thing, because you have been able to paint a clear picture to the reader of what is to be said. All right. So again, while at it, you need to make sure that in your description, you involve, or let me say, you provide sensory details. So in provision sensory details, basically here we are saying that you need to involve all your senses. Involve all your senses there. So because here you want the reader to smell whatever you smelled. You want the reader to hear the sounds that you heard while you were in that particular event. And then again, you want the reader to feel what you felt. So if you want the reader to feel, there basically you are covering the sense of touch. And again, your description, just like the one we've just had, will ensure that the reader tastes, all right, whatever that was to be tasted there. And then finally, you want the reader to see the thing. So make sure that all of these senses are covered. And then one maybe advice would be, you can write a column in your planning. Make sure that you write a column, you draw 5 columns rather, and then with each of the senses. So you will have touch, you'll have smell, you'll have hear there, you'll have taste, maybe then you can have that off-sight. And then you there in each column, you would want to do what? You would want to list maybe certain dominant details that are in relation to that sense. If it's a sense of sight, what are the things, what are the visual things that were there that you'd like to include in your writing? And again, you go to the hearing part. You describe the sounds that were there. You're going to list that one again in that particular column, in the relevant column. So you do this before. It's just an advice, something that you can do so that it ensures that you cover almost all the senses. However, having done this, along your description, you may want to change your mind and see that, okay, fine, this is not that much dominant or important, so you can leave some, but at least you would have covered a lot of them. So the sense of smell, that one of hearing, and again, touch, tasting, and seeing, it's important that you cover that one, because the reader has to be captured in your description and has to paint the picture, smell the things, not just see whatever you're describing, but also get to experience whatever you're experiencing in terms of touch, in terms of the sounds that were made, and also in terms of the food that you had. Then another question would be, how then do you make sure, what exactly do I have to do here to make sure that I also involve the sense of maybe smelling or maybe the sense of hearing? Let's just go quickly to an example as far as this is concerned. Okay, we are looking at involving your senses. Let's begin, for example, with the sense of smell. We'll just pick a few examples. We won't necessarily go through all the senses there. But then when you want to involve the reader in smelling the things that you did, you can maybe describe, obviously, the smell of maybe food that was there. It could be the different fragrances that used, maybe the guests or whoever, the people who attended that particular event, if it is an event. All right, so maybe here we'll just go through an example of this nature. So this would be an example of involving the sense of smell. You would write, an aroma of freshly cut red and green peppers made one's stomach to suddenly start grumble. All right, so this one here, you've made sure that the reader gets to smell what you smell, because expectedly we know that the reader will know the smell of what? Of red and green peppers. All right, so, and again, by doing this, involving these descriptions, the colors, you have given further details on what is it. So you've appealed to both the sense of sight and that of smell. And again, I think you do take note of the noun that we've used there. We said that it is an aroma. It's not necessarily a smell. So again, we need to be careful when it comes to that. And then again, we've got so different words that can be used to mean the same thing as smell. So you need to be careful whenever choosing that one. And again, you cannot say it's a fragrance of freshly cut red and green pepper. You cannot say that it is an odor, because it doesn't fit, all right, in what you are describing. So it's always best that you use the correct one, and you are careful when you select the nouns, when you select the verbs that you're going to use, and even the adjectives, as we said. So this is a way in which you can involve your sense of smell. On the part of the sense of hearing, here you are going to describe the sounds. And the sounds that you describe are not necessarily that of the music. Yes, music is fine. And again, when you describe the music, make sure that you've got the correct adjectives to use there. All right. So such as soft music. All right. So maybe a fast-paced tempo and everything. So you can use that one. And again, the sounds, they also include maybe of the dialogue. What were people saying? Was there anyone shouting out of there? And then again, were there any noises coming maybe from the outside? All right, so any noises or sounds that are there or that were heard, you need to include them. But of course, not just anything that is not related or relevant to the question or rather to the description that you are making. So, an example, if you are describing a scene in the bus rank, you'd know that there'll be car horns there, maybe there'll be the drivers and also their assistants shouting and everything. So all of that shouting, make sure you include that one. And again, in the midst of everything else, then there's someone who's just been stepped on his or her foot and then is screaming. So those are the sounds that you need to include in your writing so that you appeal rather to the sense of hearing. And then again, the one of sight, it's simple. The one of sight, it is very simple, because here we are basically referring to what are the things that you see. So what are people doing? So here you describe the behavior of people. That is a sight. You're appealing to the sense of sight by doing that. When you describe the different behaviors of people, and then when you maybe include color, you tell us about the color, there you are appealing to the sense of sight. So describe things, all right? Give specific details on the color, give specific details, again, on what they are doing. And also, at how things look. So here at how things look, basically, we are referring to the appearance of those things that you'd choose to include. And of course, we can continue with the rest of the senses, the sense of touch. This one is a tricky one. But a sense of touch, basically, it means that when you go to an event, while you're still in an event, you'd sit on something. You are bound to sit down. You are bound to lean on something, right? So you're about to feel, if you sit on a round table or in any table, there'll be a cloth covering. So what is the texture of the cloth? That is the sense of touch. What feeling did you get when you touched it? All right, so that is basically the texture of whatever. It could be a soft wooden or a smooth wooden table. It could be a coarse texture of maybe the cloth that is covering the table. It could be the softness of your chair or your seat. So those are the things. That is how you can appeal to the sense of sight, or rather to the sense of touch in this case. So those are just examples of how to fit, or rather what to do necessarily if you want to appeal to all the senses. And then finally, one important thing that you need to do, which again sets your description apart, it takes it to another level, is that you need to use figurative language. So you need to use figurative language. And make sure with this one, you don't just use it unless you are sure you know how to use that one. So use figurative language. When we talk about figurative language, we basically refer to the use of maybe similes. I think most of us, we know what a simile is. So you will use a simile there to compare things that you see to something else. So here you're going to use the word like. Someone danced like a whatever it is that you liken to dancing, then you'll be using that a simile. That is a figurative language that you can use. And again, you can compare, which is a direct comparison here, by using what? A metaphor. So when you can use like a metaphor, when you say someone is maybe, you would say, my father is a lion, basically to mean that your father, it's someone who's very, very strict, all right, and you are scared of him. And again, there are so many that you can use. You can also use personification. And an example of personification, so a metaphor, or rather an example of a personification would be, the car covered in mud was crying for a wash. So we know basically that if it's a car, it cannot cry, but then you've used what? Personification. And then which means that you have used a non-literal meaning of the word, but still it makes sense. In the context in which it has been used, it makes sense. It is easy for the reader to follow that, okay, fine, this is basically what you are saying. So make sure that you include figurative language and use one that you are sure of. There's far more that you can use for this one. So finally, when now concluding the topic, it is important that in your description, you don't deviate from the main purpose of your writing, from the main impression that you are trying to create, because it is easy to stray from your description because you don't follow, especially if you have not organized your description very well. So make sure that you always remain relevant to the subject that you chose to describe. All right, so if you're describing a prom night, make sure that the activities and everything that you describe, they make the prom night. They are the things that are dominant in that prom night. If it's a wedding, they are dominant in the wedding. If you're describing a place, make sure that the appearance that you want the reader to visualize, it is the one that you paint in your descriptions. All right, if you, for example, you are looking at a house, you'd want to first begin describing the house from the outside, because when you say that it is a striking, it is an amazing house, you'll describe it from the outside, then get inside. Everything else that is there, what is it that is there inside the house, and then maybe choose a specific corner of the house that you would want to focus on. Again, you would be supporting the fact that this is a house that you say it is amazing, and then what are the things that are amazing about that house. So the one important thing about every description is that you want whoever will be reading the description, which is the reader, to experience the things that you experienced, to visualize, create an image in his or her mind about, or rather of what you are describing, such that he or she will feel like he was part of whatever that happened there. So that's the end of our lesson today. Hopefully it was beneficial to you, and then after this, hopefully you're going to write better descriptive essays. In our next lesson, we'll be looking again at descriptive essays, but there we'll be focusing more on examples, where probably we'll have a fully written descriptive essay, and then we'll be looking at it closely at what are the things that needs to be done and what are those things that need not to be done. Until then, have a good viewing.
Thank you for joining us in today's lesson. From me, Bongwe Kinzi, goodbye.